The moon hangs heavy in the sky, casting its pale light across the stone towers and silent courtyards of the royal castle. Everything is still, too still, as if the very air itself holds its breath, waiting for something momentous to occur. The kingdom sleeps, unaware that their king stands alone in his chambers, his heart heavy with a dread he cannot name, a fear he cannot escape. This is not the fear of battle. The Alpha King has faced countless enemies, has torn through opposition with the savage grace of his wolf form, has stood victorious over battlefields soaked in blood and glory. No, this fear is something far more insidious. It creeps through his veins like poison, settling deep in his chest where no sword can reach it. This is the fear of being diminished, the fear of appearing weak before his people, the fear of losing the respect he has spent his entire life building, brick by brutal brick. Before I walk you through the story, please tell me your name, the city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel as part of your great support. Tomorrow, he will marry, and the thought fills him with a revulsion so profound, it threatens to consume him whole. The arranged marriage, a tradition as old as the kingdom itself, has bound him to a fate he cannot escape. His advisors speak of duty. His counsel whispers of alliances and political necessity. His people expect him to honor the ancient ways. But none of them understand what this costs him. None of them can comprehend the depth of his resistance, the way every fiber of his being rejects this union. The woman he is to marry, he has not yet seen her face. But the reports that have reached him paint a picture that makes his blood run cold. Unremarkable, they say. Plain. Ordinary. Nothing about her speaks of the beauty or grace one would expect for a queen. And for the Alpha King, whose very existence is defined by dominance, by the fierce pride of being the strongest, the most feared, the most powerful, the thought of binding himself to such a woman feels like a death sentence. What will his enemies think? What will his allies whisper behind closed doors? Will they see him as weak, choosing or being forced to choose, a bride who cannot even stand as a proper reflection of his status? The questions plague him, circling his mind like vultures over carrion. Sleep has abandoned him. Peace feels like a distant memory. All that remains is this gnawing anxiety, this terrible anticipation of a future he cannot change. As a young heir, he was taught that strength was everything. He would never allow his kingdom to be ruled by weakness, especially not by an unworthy queen. And so, when the time came for an arranged marriage, he was repulsed by the thought of marrying a woman not of his choosing. His worst fear was marrying a bride that could make him appear weak in the eyes of his people. From the moment he could walk, he was trained. His father, the previous Alpha King, had been a harsh teacher, unyielding in his expectations. A king shows no mercy, he would say, his voice like gravel. A king never bends. A king never breaks. And above all, a king never allows emotion to cloud his judgment. These lessons were beaten into him, sometimes literally, until they became the very foundation of his identity. He learned to fight before he learned to read. He learned to kill before he learned to love. Every scar on his body tells a story of survival, of triumph over those who would challenge him. He earned his position not through birthright alone, but through blood and brutality. When his father finally fell in battle, as all Alpha Kings eventually must, he took the throne without hesitation, without grief, without any display of the weakness that had been systematically carved out of him throughout his youth. Under his rule, the kingdom flourished. His enemies learned to fear the mere mention of his name. His allies learned that his word was absolute. His people learned that their king was a force of nature, unstoppable and unmovable. He was the embodiment of everything an alpha should be: powerful, decisive, merciless when necessary, and always in control. But control requires sacrifice. It demands the suppression of anything that might be perceived as vulnerability. Love, compassion, tenderness, these were luxuries he could not afford. They were weaknesses that could be exploited, cracks in the armor that could bring down even the mightiest warrior. So he locked them away, deep inside where they could never escape, where they could never betray him. And now the elders and the council demand that he marry. The ancient laws are clear. An alpha king must take a queen, must produce an heir, must ensure the continuation of the bloodline. He cannot refuse without breaking the very traditions that legitimize his rule. He is trapped, caught in a web of duty and expectation, forced to accept a bride he has never chosen, never wanted, never even seen. The reports about her only make it worse. They speak of a woman with no notable features, no remarkable qualities, nothing that would distinguish her from 1,000 other ordinary faces. She comes from a minor family, one with little political influence or power. The match was arranged by the council for reasons he barely understands, something about bloodlines and prophecies, and the kinds of mystical nonsense he has always dismissed as superstition. But superstition or not, tomorrow she will become his queen. And the very thought makes him feel as if he is being buried alive, the weight of this unwanted union pressing down on his chest until he can barely breathe. The day of the wedding arrived, and the king stood before his destiny, awaiting the reveal. When she was unveiled, his heart dropped. The woman before him was everything he feared, plain, ordinary, and completely unremarkable. The great hall has been transformed. Flowers, white roses and moonflowers, cascade from every surface, their fragrance thick and cloying in the air. Candles flicker in their hundreds, casting dancing shadows across the assembled crowd. The kingdom's most important figures have gathered to witness this moment, their faces a mixture of curiosity and carefully concealed judgment. They watch him, always watching, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in his composure. The Alpha King stands at the altar, his posture rigid, his face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. He wears the ceremonial robes of his station, deep crimson and black, embroidered with the symbols of his lineage. The crown sits heavy on his head, a constant reminder of the weight of his responsibilities. His hands are clasped behind his back, not in nervousness, but to hide the way his fingers want to curl into fists. He can hear the whispers. They think they're being subtle, but his enhanced hearing picks up every word. She's not what I expected. The king must be displeased. I heard she's quite plain. Poor man, bound to such an unfortunate match. Each whisper is a needle in his pride, a confirmation of his worst fears. The ceremony progresses with agonizing slowness. The high priest drones on about sacred bonds and eternal commitments, words that mean nothing to the king in this moment. All he can think about is the veiled figure approaching from the other end of the hall, escorted by her family, walking toward him like an executioner approaching the condemned. She is small, he notices, unremarkable in stature. The ceremonial veil covers her completely, a cascade of white silk that reveals nothing. But even through the fabric, he can see that there is nothing extraordinary about her form, nothing that speaks of the grace or beauty one would expect in a queen. She moves with hesitance, not the confident stride of someone worthy of standing beside him. She is everything the reports said she would be, ordinary, unremarkable beneath him. The moment arrives. The high priest gestures, and her attendants step forward to lift the veil. Time seems to slow. The king's jaw tightens, his eyes hardening as he prepares himself for the disappointment he knows is coming. He tells himself it doesn't matter. He tells himself this is merely duty, merely tradition, merely the price of maintaining his rule. He tells himself he can endure this, as he has endured everything else. The veil lifts, and his heart drops. She is exactly what he feared. Plain features, unremarkable in every way. Her face lacks the sharp beauty of the noble women he's known, the ethereal quality of the few females who have caught his eye over the years. Her eyes are downcast, her expression one of submission and nervousness. She is a mouse, a timid little creature who couldn't possibly stand beside him as an equal. The disappointment crashes over him like a wave, so powerful it threatens to show on his face. He hears the gasps from the crowd, the barely concealed murmurs of shock and worse, pity. They pity him. They pity their king. The humiliation burns through him like acid, eating away at his composure. This is his nightmare made manifest. This is the weakness he has always feared, now standing before him in flesh and blood, about to become permanently bound to him for all the world to see. His mind races with dark thoughts. How can he present this woman as his queen? How can he stand before his enemies with her at his side without inviting mockery? How can he maintain the fearsome reputation he has built when everyone can see that he has been shackled to someone so utterly ordinary? The high priest is speaking again, but the king barely hears the words. His entire being is focused on maintaining his composure, on not allowing the disgust and disappointment to show on his face. He has fought battles that would break lesser men. He has stared down death itself without flinching. He can endure this. He must endure this. But as the veil lifted, something changed. A shift, so subtle at first, the king didn't notice. Her eyes locked onto his, and in that instant, he felt a power unlike anything he'd ever known. She was more than just a mere mortal. Her presence stirred something deep within him. It happens in a fraction of a second. A moment so brief, he almost misses it. She lifts her gaze, those downcast eyes rising to meet his, and the world tilts on its axis. Her eyes. They are not the meek, submissive eyes he expected. They are deep, impossibly deep, like wells that descend into ancient places no light has ever touched. And they shimmer. Actually shimmer, with something he cannot name, cannot classify, cannot dismiss. The color is strange, not quite brown, not quite green, not quite gold, but somehow all of these at once, shifting and changing like the surface of a storm-tossed sea. And in those eyes, he sees power. Not the brutish power of physical strength, not the obvious power of magic or sorcery, but something far more primal, far more fundamental. It radiates from her like heat from a flame, invisible but undeniable. His wolf, the beast that lives within him, the savage creature that is as much a part of him as his own heartbeat, stirs in a way it never has before. Not in aggression, not in dominance, but in recognition. The sensation is disorienting. His pulse quickens. His senses, already heightened by his werewolf nature, seem to expand even further. He can smell her now, a scent that cuts through the overwhelming fragrance of flowers and candles and crowded bodies. She smells of earth and rain and something ancient, something that speaks to a memory he doesn't have, a knowledge that predates his existence. He tries to shake off the feeling, to dismiss it as mere nerves or the stress of the ceremony. But he can't. The connection between their gazes holds, unbreakable, and in that moment he feels exposed in a way he has never felt before. It's as if she can see past the mask, past the armor, past every defense he has constructed over the years, directly into the core of who he is. His rational mind rebels against this. She is plain. She is ordinary. She is nothing. The reports were clear. The evidence of his own eyes confirms it. And yet this sensation, this feeling of immense power radiating from her, cannot be denied. It's like standing before a door that has always been locked, only to discover that the key has been in his possession all along, waiting for this exact moment to reveal itself. The high priest continues the ceremony, oblivious to the king's internal turmoil. The words wash over him, without meaning. All his focus, all his considerable will, is concentrated on the woman standing before him. She hasn't moved. She hasn't spoken. But her eyes remain locked with his, and in their depths he sees something that both terrifies and fascinates him. Is this some kind of magic? Some trick of the light? His mind searches for rational explanations, for ways to dismiss what he's experiencing as illusion or imagination. But he knows better. He has lived long enough, fought enough battles, faced enough genuine threats to recognize truth when it stands before him. And the truth is that this woman, this plain, unremarkable woman he was prepared to despise, is something far more than she appears. His pride wars with his instincts. His carefully constructed worldview clashes against this new, undeniable reality. He is the Alpha King. He is the one with power. He is the one who inspires fear and awe. And yet, standing before this woman, he feels like he is the one being measured, being judged, being seen for perhaps the first time in his life. The ceremony reaches its conclusion. Vows are exchanged, though he barely registers his own words. Rings are placed, cool metal sliding onto fingers. The high priest pronounces them bound, husband and wife, king and queen. The crowd erupts in obligatory celebration. But all of it feels distant, muffled, as if happening in another world entirely. Because in this moment, as the king looks into his new bride's eyes, he realizes with a certainty that shakes him to his core, everything he thought he knew is about to be challenged. Every assumption he has made is about to be tested. And the woman he feared would make him appear weak might very well be the strongest force he has ever encountered. When the first test of her strength arrived, no one expected what followed. She stood before the council, her eyes not filled with fear but with the calm confidence of someone who held the power to change everything. What the king didn't realize was that his bride was no ordinary woman, and that fear, the one that had haunted him all along, was about to become his salvation. The traditional week of wedding celebrations has barely concluded when the challenge arrives. It comes, as challenges often do, from an unexpected source. Lord Matthias, one of the king's most ambitious council members, has been questioning the new queen's worthiness since the moment her veil was lifted. His words are carefully chosen, wrapped in a language of concern and tradition, but the king recognizes them for what they are: an attempt to undermine, to create division, to exploit what Matthias perceives as weakness. The council chamber is filled with the kingdom's most powerful figures. Stone walls rise around them, decorated with the banners of ancient battles and the shields of legendary warriors. Torches burn in their sconces, casting flickering light across faces both friendly and hostile. The king sits upon his throne, the queen beside him in a chair that, until now, has remained empty for generations. Lord Matthias steps forward, his voice carrying through the chamber with practiced authority. "Your Majesty, the council has concerns." The queen, while certainly adequate in her position, has yet to demonstrate the strength befitting her station. Perhaps a test? A simple demonstration of her capabilities to assure the people that their queen is worthy of the crown she wears. It's a trap, obviously. A test designed for failure. The king knows this. Every person in the room knows this. Matthias expects the queen to falter, to expose her inadequacy before the entire council, giving him the ammunition he needs to continue his challenges, to plant seeds of doubt about the king's judgment in accepting this marriage. The king is about to intervene, to shut down this transparent attempt at humiliation when he feels a hand on his arm. Small fingers, surprisingly strong, gently restraining him. He turns to look at his bride, ready to insist that she doesn't need to subject herself to this farce. But what he sees stops the words in his throat. She is standing, rising from her chair with a grace that seems impossible for someone who appeared so timid just days ago. Her plain features are calm, composed, completely devoid of the fear or nervousness one would expect from someone being publicly challenged by a powerful lord. Instead, her expression holds something that makes the king's pulse quicken: absolute confidence. "Lord Matthias," she says, and her voice, the first time many in the council have heard her speak, carries through the chamber with unexpected clarity and strength. "You wish to see a demonstration of my capabilities? Very well. What would you have me do?" Matthias, clearly not expecting her to accept so readily, scrambles to formulate a challenge. The queen should possess the strength to protect herself at minimum. Perhaps a test of defensive capability. We have wards placed throughout the castle, ancient protections that require significant power to activate. If the queen could activate the ward stone in this very chamber, it would demonstrate her basic competence. The king wants to object. The ward stones are notoriously difficult to activate, requiring not just power but a specific resonance with the ancient magic that permeates the kingdom. Even he finds it taxing to activate them. For someone untrained, someone who has shown no previous aptitude for such things, the task is nearly impossible. But his bride simply nods, as if Matthias has asked her to complete the simplest of tasks. She walks to the center of the chamber, her movements unhurried, unconcerned with the dozens of eyes following her every step. The ward stone, a massive crystal embedded in the floor, dark and dormant, sits waiting. Legend says it was placed there by the first Alpha King, a protective measure that can shield the entire council chamber from attack, both physical and magical. The queen kneels beside the stone, placing both hands upon its surface. The chamber falls silent. Even the torches seem to still, their flames frozen in anticipation. For a moment, nothing happens. The king can hear Matthias's quiet snort of derision, can sense the satisfaction radiating from those who bet against the queen's success. His own jaw tightens, preparing for the humiliation he will feel on her behalf, already planning the words he will use to defend her, to salvage what he can from this situation. And then light. It starts as a flicker, a brief pulse of luminescence deep within the crystal. But it grows. Rapidly. Exponentially. The dark stone begins to glow, soft at first, then brighter, then blazing with an intensity that forces many in the chamber to shield their eyes. The light is pure, crystalline, beautiful in its power. It spreads from the ward stone outward, racing across the floor in intricate patterns of ancient runes and symbols, climbing the walls, reaching toward the ceiling. The entire chamber illuminates with protective energy, the ward activating more fully, more powerfully than the king has ever seen. The air itself seems to hum with power, vibrating at a frequency that resonates in his bones. His wolf responds, not with aggression but with awe, recognizing the magnitude of what it's witnessing. But it's not just the ward stone. As the queen kneels there, hands still pressed against the crystal, something else happens. Other ward stones throughout the castle, stones that should be completely independent, completely separate, begin to activate as well. The king can feel it, can sense the awakening of protective enchantments that have lain dormant for decades, perhaps centuries. It's as if the entire castle is responding to her presence, to her touch, recognizing her in a way that defies all logic and expectation. The chamber erupts in gasps and exclamations. Lord Matthias has gone pale, his confident smirk replaced by shock and something that might be fear. The other council members stare, some in wonder, others in suspicion, all in undeniable recognition that they have just witnessed something extraordinary. The queen remains kneeling, seemingly unaffected by the magnitude of power flowing through her. When she finally removes her hands from the ward stone, the light doesn't immediately fade. It pulses, settles, then maintains a gentle glow, a state the king has never seen before. Active but controlled. Protective but not aggressive. She stands, brushing off her dress with casual movements, as if she hasn't just accomplished what should be impossible. When she turns to face the council, her eyes, those strange, shifting eyes that the king can't stop thinking about, are calm and confident. "Is this demonstration sufficient, Lord Matthias?" she asks, her voice carrying just a hint of amusement. "Or would you like me to do something more challenging?" The silence in the chamber is absolute. No one dares to speak. No one dares to move. They have just witnessed the impossible, and the implications are still sinking in. The king stares at his bride, no, at his queen with new eyes. Who is this woman? What is she? The questions multiply in his mind, each one more urgent than the last. But beneath the questions, beneath the shock and confusion, something else stirs. Something that feels dangerously close to admiration, to respect, to the first stirrings of genuine interest in this woman he thought he would despise. When the kingdom is threatened and the king finds himself on the brink of collapse, it is his bride, the woman he thought weak, who steps forward, revealing a strength that saves them all. In that moment, the king realizes that true strength isn't about power or pride. It's about knowing when to trust, when to let go, and when to embrace the unknown. The attack comes on a night when the moon hides behind clouds, as if even the celestial bodies sense the darkness approaching. The king is in his private chambers, going over reports of border conflicts, when the first alarm sounds. It's a howl, not of celebration or communication, but of warning. Danger. Enemy at the gates. He transforms instantly, his human form giving way to the massive wolf that is his true nature. Black fur, eyes like molten gold, teeth and claws capable of tearing through armor and bone with equal ease. He races through the castle corridors, his enhanced senses taking in everything: the scent of foreign wolves, the sound of battle beginning, the taste of fear in the air. The throne room. That's where they've breached. He arrives to find chaos, a dozen enemy wolves, larger and more savage than any he's encountered before, tearing through his guards. These are not normal werewolves. They move with unnatural speed, their eyes glowing with a sickly green light that speaks of dark magic, of corruption, of something fundamentally wrong. The king throws himself into the battle with savage fury, his jaws close around the throat of the nearest enemy, tearing it out in a spray of dark blood. His claws rake across another's flank, leaving deep gouges that would fell any normal opponent. But these creatures don't fall. They barely seem to register the wounds, healing almost instantly, pressing forward with relentless aggression. He fights like the warrior he is, like the alpha king who has never known defeat. But there are too many, and they're too strong. For every enemy he wounds, two more seem to take its place. His guards are falling, their screams cutting through the chaos. Blood, his own and others, soaks into his fur. Exhaustion begins to creep into his limbs, a sensation so foreign he barely recognizes it. A massive claw catches him across the ribs, sending him crashing into a stone pillar. The pain explodes through his body, sharp and immediate. He struggles to rise, but another enemy is already there, jaws open, ready to deliver a killing blow. His vision blurs. His strength fails. For the first time in his life, the Alpha King faces the very real possibility of death. And then, she's there. The queen appears in the throne room's entrance, still in her sleeping gown, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looks small, fragile, completely out of place in this scene of carnage and violence. The king tries to shout a warning, to tell her to run, to flee while she still can. But his wolf form can only manage a desperate growl. She doesn't run. She doesn't show any sign of fear. Instead, she walks forward with calm, measured steps, directly into the heart of the battle. An enemy wolf turns toward her, sensing easy prey, lunging with jaws wide and hungry. And she stops it with a raised hand. Not physically. She doesn't touch the creature. But it stops nonetheless, frozen mid-leap as if caught in invisible chains. Its body trembles, straining against whatever force holds it, but it cannot move forward. Cannot move at all. The queen's eyes begin to glow. Not with the sickly green of the corrupted wolves, but with a pure, silver light that seems to emanate from within her very soul. The air around her shimmers, distorts, as power, raw, unfiltered, ancient power, begins to manifest in the physical world. She speaks, and her voice echoes with layers of sound, as if 1,000 voices speak in unison through her throat. You do not belong here. You are corruption given form, darkness wearing flesh. I name you. I see you. I banish you. The frozen wolf begins to scream, a sound of pure agony that pierces even through the chaos of battle. Its form starts to dissolve, breaking apart into wisps of shadow and ash that dissipate into nothingness. Not killed. Not merely defeated. Unmade. Erased from existence, as if it had never been. The other enemy wolves turn their attention to the queen, recognizing the threat she poses. They converge on her from all sides, a coordinated attack meant to overwhelm through sheer numbers. The king, still struggling to rise, watches in horror, certain he's about to witness her death. But the queen raises both hands, and the silver light explodes outward in a wave of pure force. It washes over the corrupted wolves like a tsunami of power, and where it touches them, they begin to break apart. Their howls of pain and rage fill the throne room, echoing off stone walls, a symphony of destruction. The light doesn't harm the king or his guards. It flows around them like water around stones, recognizing friend from foe with perfect precision. But for the enemies, there is no escape. One by one, They dissolve, their corrupted forms unable to withstand the purity of her power. In less than a minute, the battle is over. The throne room falls silent except for the heavy breathing of the surviving guards and the king's own labored panting. The queen lowers her hands, and the light fades. She stands in the center of the carnage, completely unharmed, her expression serene. Around her feet, patches of ash mark where the enemy wolves once stood. The air still tingles with residual energy, with the echoes of the power she unleashed. She turns to where the king lies, injured and stunned, and walks to him. Her small hands reach out, touching the wounds on his side with gentle fingers. The silver light returns, softer now, flowing from her touch into his body. He feels his injuries healing, flesh knitting back together, broken bones straightening and mending. The pain recedes, replaced by a warmth that spreads through his entire being. When she's finished, when he's whole again, she meets his eyes. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew shatters completely. This woman, this plain, ordinary woman he was so ready to dismiss, possesses power that makes his own abilities seem like child's play. She has just saved his life, saved his kingdom, with a display of strength that defies comprehension. And she did it without hesitation, without fear, with the calm certainty of someone who has always known exactly what she is capable of. The king's mind reels, trying to process, to understand.
Who is she?
What is she? The questions that have plagued him since the wedding ceremony now demand answers with desperate urgency. But beneath the questions, beneath the shock and confusion, something else emerges. Something he has suppressed for so long, he barely recognizes it. Humility.
Awe.
The recognition that he has been wrong, profoundly, fundamentally wrong, about everything. True strength isn't about physical power or the ability to dominate. True strength isn't about pride or the image one projects to the world. True strength is this: the courage to stand against darkness, the wisdom to use power justly, the confidence that requires no validation from others. His bride, no, his queen, embodies all of this and more. And the Alpha King, who has spent his entire life believing himself to be the strongest, the most powerful, the ultimate authority, realizes that he has been humbled by a woman he thought beneath him. It should fill him with rage, with resentment, with wounded pride. But instead, he feels something entirely different. Relief. A profound, overwhelming relief that loosens knots in his soul he didn't even know existed. For the first time in his life, he doesn't have to carry everything alone. He doesn't have to be invincible, infallible, isolated in his strength. Because standing beside him is someone stronger than he ever imagined, someone who chose to save him even when he doubted her, someone who demonstrated the kind of power and grace he has been searching for without even knowing it. That night, as the moon bathed the world in silver, the truth was finally revealed. She was no ordinary woman. She was a descendant of the ancient bloodlines, a lineage that had been lost
To time.
The king had not just married a bride. He had married a force that would shape his future and the fate of his kingdom. They sit together in the king's private chambers, the battle cleaned away, the castle secured, the immediate crisis past. But nothing feels settled. Everything feels on the edge of transformation, of revelation. The king has shifted back to his human form, dressed in simple clothing, the ceremonial trappings of his position discarded. The queen sits across from him, still in the same sleeping gown she wore during the battle, seeming unbothered by the bloodstains and ash that mark the fabric. "I think," the king says carefully, his voice rough with emotion, "it's time you told me the truth. All of it." The queen nods, as if she's been waiting for this moment. Her strange, shifting eyes meet his without wavering. "What do you wish to know?" "Everything. Who you are, what you are, why you were brought here, to me, through this arranged marriage that makes no political sense." The questions pour out of him, no longer restrained by pride or the need to maintain control. Why the council insisted on this union? Why you appeared plain and ordinary when clearly you are anything but? Why you possess power that should be impossible? She's quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she speaks, her voice is soft but clear, each word chosen with care. My lineage is ancient, far older than this kingdom, older than the werewolf clans themselves. We are the guardians, the first bloodline, created when magic itself was young and wild and pure. We were given the task of maintaining balance, of protecting against corruption, of standing between the world and the darkness that constantly seeks to consume it. The king listens, his enhanced hearing picking up every nuance in her voice, every subtle shift in her heartbeat. She's telling the truth. He can sense it with absolute certainty. For centuries, we served our purpose, she continues. But as time passed, as the world changed and magic faded from common knowledge, we faded as well. Our numbers dwindled. Our power was forgotten. Most believed we had died out entirely, our lineage lost to history. But you survived, the king says. A few of us. Hidden, scattered, living in obscurity to protect the secret of what we are. The council of your kingdom, or rather, the eldest among them, knew of our existence. They knew that a guardian had been born, the first in generations with the full measure of our power. And they knew that darkness was coming. The king's blood runs cold. The attack tonight was just the beginning, she confirms. Those corrupted wolves are symptoms of a greater sickness, a darkness that has been growing in the shadows for years. It will continue to grow unless it's stopped. Unless someone with the power to oppose it stands in its way. Understanding begins to dawn. The arranged marriage. They brought you here deliberately. They brought me here because this kingdom stands at the center of what's coming. Because the Alpha King's strength, combined with the Guardian's power, might be enough to turn the tide. Because ancient prophecies speak of a union between Wolf and Guardian, a partnership that could save or doom the world depending on how it unfolds. She pauses, and for the first time, he sees vulnerability in her expression. But they couldn't tell you the truth. The prophecies are specific about that. The king had to choose freely, had to come to understanding on his own, without manipulation or coercion. So they arranged the marriage, but they hid what I truly was. The plain appearance, the king says, understanding clicking into place. That was intentional? A glamour, a simple illusion to hide my true nature until the time was right. It served another purpose as well. It tested you. Tested whether you could see past surface appearances, whether you possessed the wisdom to recognize strength in unexpected forms, whether you were worthy of the power you would need to wield. The king barks out a harsh laugh, but there's no humor in it. I failed that test rather spectacularly. You struggled with it, she corrects gently. But you didn't fail. You felt the truth, even when your eyes told you lies. Your wolf recognized me, even when your mind rejected the possibility. And tonight, when it mattered most, you didn't question my intervention. You trusted, even without understanding. He stands, pacing to the window, looking out over his kingdom bathed in moonlight. So much makes sense now. The council's insistence on this particular marriage, the strange urgency in their manner, the cryptic references to tradition and necessity that never quite explained their reasoning. You could have told me, he says, not accusingly, but simply stating a fact. After the wedding, after the ceremony, you could have revealed the truth. Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was lying, trying to manipulate you, attempting to claim importance I didn't deserve? Her voice is understanding, not judgmental. You needed to see for yourself. You needed to experience the truth rather than simply being told it. She's right.
He knows she's right.
If she had come to him with claims of ancient bloodlines and mystical powers, he would have dismissed her as delusional or manipulative. His pride, his certainty in his own superiority, would have blinded him to any truth that contradicted his preconceptions. The darkness you mentioned, he says, turning back to face her. How bad is it? Bad enough that I was willing to submit to this arranged marriage, to allow myself to be presented as something I'm not, to endure your initial disdain and the court's judgment. She meets his gaze steadily. Bad enough that the fate of not just this kingdom, but potentially all kingdoms, depends on what we do next. The weight of it settles over him like a physical burden. But strangely, it doesn't feel crushing. Perhaps because, for the first time, he doesn't face it alone. "Why me?" he asks quietly. "Why specifically did you need the Alpha King?" Because darkness of this magnitude requires both types of strength to oppose it. My power is ancient, mystical, attuned to the flows of magic that most can no longer perceive. But it lacks grounding in the physical world. Your power is primal, physical, rooted in blood and bone and earth. Together, we form a balance. Separately, we would each fail. But united. She trails off, letting the possibility hang in the air. United, we might have a chance, the king finishes. More than a chance. The prophecies speak of this union as the turning point, the moment when darkness can finally be pushed back. She stands, moving closer to him. But prophecies are not guarantees. They are possibilities, paths that might be walked if the right choices are made. "And what choices do we need to make?" he asks. "To trust each other. To set aside pride and fear and all the barriers we erect to protect ourselves. To become true partners, not just in name but in spirit." Her hand reaches out, and after a moment's hesitation, he takes it. Her fingers are warm in his, her grip surprisingly strong. The king looks down at their joined hands, at this woman who is so much more than he ever imagined, and feels something shift deep inside him. The walls he has built around his heart, the defenses that have kept him isolated and alone for so long, begin to crack. "I was cruel to you," he says quietly. "In my thoughts, in my judgments, in the way I looked at you with such disdain. You didn't deserve that. You were operating with incomplete information, viewing the world through a lens that had been ground and polished by your upbringing." Her tone is forgiving, understanding. "I don't hold it against you. What matters is what you choose now, knowing the truth." "I choose to fight," he says without hesitation. "For the kingdom, for our people, against this darkness you've described. And I choose to do it with you, as my partner, as my equal." The words come easier than he expected, feeling right in a way nothing has felt in years. "I choose to trust you, even though trust is perhaps the most difficult thing for me to give." She smiles then, the first genuine smile he's seen from her, and it transforms her face completely. The glamour, he can see it now, can perceive the illusion that made her appear plain, flickers and fades. Her true appearance emerges, and he realizes with a start that she is beautiful. Not in the conventional way, not in the manner that would have caught his eye in court, but beautiful in a deeper sense, with an otherworldly quality that speaks of ancient magic and timeless power. "That," she says softly, "is all I needed to hear." And so, the Alpha King and his bride ruled, not as two separate forces, but as one. Together, they forged a new era for their people, one founded on understanding, power, and love. The king's worst fear had turned into his greatest blessing. The months that follow are unlike anything the king has ever experienced. Learning to work with the queen, to truly work with her, as an equal partner, requires him to unlearn almost everything he was taught about leadership and strength. It's humbling, it's difficult, and it's the most rewarding challenge he's ever faced. They train together, combining her mystical abilities with his physical prowess. He learns to sense the flows of magic she perceives so naturally, while she learns to ground her power in the earth and blood that are his natural domain. Their abilities complement each other in ways that seem almost designed, as if the universe itself intended this partnership. The darkness continues to press against the kingdom's borders. More corrupted creatures attempt to breach their defenses. But each time, the king and queen face them together. Each time, their combined strength proves sufficient to drive back the threat. And each time, their bond deepens, strengthened by shared danger and mutual trust. The court's perception changes as well. The whispers of disdain and pity fade, replaced by awe and respect. The queen who once seemed so inadequate now stands as a figure of power and grace, her true nature no longer hidden. And the king, rather than being diminished by her strength, seems somehow more powerful, more complete, as if he has found a missing piece of himself he didn't know was absent. Lord Matthias, who challenged the queen so publicly, becomes one of her most devoted supporters after she saves his life during a particularly vicious attack. The council, seeing the truth of what the eldest members had known all along, rallies behind their king and queen with renewed loyalty. But the greatest change happens in private, in the quiet moments between battles and political maneuverings. The king finds himself talking to his queen about things he has never spoken aloud before. His fears, his doubts, the crushing weight of expectations that has shaped his entire life. She listens without judgment, offering understanding born from her own experiences of carrying power and responsibility that others can barely comprehend. He learns about her life before the marriage, the loneliness of being the last of her kind, the burden of knowing that the fate of the world might rest on her shoulders, the fear that she might fail in her duty. He learns that beneath her calm exterior, she had been just as uncertain about their union as he was, just as afraid that they might not be able to work together, that the prophecies might have been wrong. "I thought you might never see me," she admits one night, lying beside him in the darkness. "I thought you might be so consumed by pride and preconception that you would refuse to acknowledge the truth, even when it stood right in front of you." "I almost was," he confesses, pulling her closer. "If not for that moment at the altar, when our eyes met and I felt your power, I might have remained blind forever. But you didn't. That's what matters. You chose to see, even when seeing meant admitting you were wrong." Her hand traces patterns on his chest, and he marvels at how natural this intimacy feels, how right it is to have her beside him. Love, he discovers, is not the weakness his father taught him to fear. Love is not a crack in his armor or a vulnerability to be exploited. Instead, it's a different kind of strength, the courage to be truly known, the willingness to share burdens rather than bearing them alone, the trust that someone will stand beside you even when standing is difficult. The Alpha King, who once believed himself complete in his isolation, finds completion in connection. The woman he feared would make him weak becomes the source of his greatest strength. And together, they become something greater than either could have been alone. The darkness is pushed back, slowly but surely. The corrupted creatures that once threatened the kingdom find themselves facing a force they cannot overcome. The balance is restored, maintained by two souls who have found harmony and partnership. Years pass. The kingdom prospers under their joint rule. Children are born, heirs who carry both bloodlines, both types of power, who will continue the work their parents began. The prophecies that brought them together fade into history, their purpose fulfilled. And through it all, the king never forgets the lesson he learned on that fateful night when his worst fear became his salvation. He never forgets that true strength lies not in standing alone, but in knowing when to trust, when to let go of pride, and when to embrace the unknown. He never forgets the woman who taught him this, who stood before him when he could not stand himself, who saw in him a partner rather than an obstacle. The woman who saved not just his life, but his soul, by showing him that there are types of power and strength he had never imagined. The Alpha King's worst fear, marrying an ugly bride, had indeed changed everything. But not in the way he anticipated. It changed him from a ruler who stood in isolation to a leader who understood the power of partnership. It changed him from a man afraid of appearing weak to someone who knew that true weakness was the inability to see strength in unexpected forms. It changed him from an Alpha King into something greater, a man capable of love, of trust, of growth. A man who learned that the greatest power comes not from standing alone in pride, but from standing together in partnership. And in the end, that made all the difference. What are your thoughts on the Alpha King's journey? Can love truly conquer fear? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the true power of the heart.